So today we begin the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. The 18th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita is the longest chapter in the entire Bhagavad-Gita. It has, I think, somewhere around 76 verses, probably four more than the chapter 2, which is also a compilation of a sort of a summary of things to come. And 18th chapter is a summary of what has already been spoken up till now. And thus it becomes a conclusion. It contains the essence of the Bhagavad Gita, and it picks up where 17 left off. And from Om Tat Sat, it leads you to complete and absolute surrender. Sarva Dharman Parityaja Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tvam Sarva Papevyo Moksha Ishami Masucha. But when you have so many verses in a chapter, it becomes difficult to understand the chapter, because very often what happens is that a student of the Bhagavad Gita gets lost in the verses. And because he gets lost in the verses, he is completely bewildered as to what the chapter is trying to teach him. What is Krishna's message in this chapter? And to understand what is Krishna's message in this chapter, you need to have a macro view. And by macro view, I mean that you must understand what is the structure of the 18th chapter. And also you must know what are the themes of the 18th chapter and how these themes of the 18th chapter are connected to one another. Also, what happens is I have seen that some translations of the Bhagavad Gita in their commentaries have mistakenly translated the Kamyanam Karmanam Nyasam Sannyasam Kavayo Viduhu. So one of these popular translations has actually said that this represents external renunciation. And I would like to take a full chapter on what Bhagavad Gita says about renunciation some other time. But essentially, the Bhagavad Gita does not make mistakes or contradict itself on 2 points. And what are these 2 points? These 2 points that the Bhagavad Gita never contradicts itself on is number one, it is for internal renunciation, not external renunciation. The second thing it never contradicts itself on is that the individual soul, his job is to be absorbed in God, who is the super soul. So these two are constant throughout the Bhagavad Gita. And despite people trying to twist and turn and pervert interpretations and translations to fit their philosophy, these two things you should keep in mind. That Bhagavad Gita is not about external renunciation, which I will do in detail. And also that Bhagavad Gita is not about being God. It is about being an individual soul worshipping God. So, how is the structure of this Bhagavad Gita? And what is this Bhagavad Gita 18th chapter trying to tell us? So, you should know that if you have a Bhagavad Gita with you, you should open it to the 18th chapter, and I will help you to divide it into different sections. There's a theological progression in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. First, sannyas and tyag. What is true renunciation? He points out what is true renunciation, which is internal and not external. This is in 18.1 to 18.12. Please make a note in your Bhagavad Gita. 18.1 to 18.12 of this chapter deals with sannyas and tyag. It clarifies true renunciation. 18.13 to 18.18 gives you the 5 causes of action. Now, why does it deal with 5 causes of action? And it requires some elaboration, which I will give you in course of time. The purpose of this 18.13 to 18.18 is it removes the ego of doership. It tries to tell you there are 5 factors involved. There is no single factor for the success of any action. So that is from 18.13 to 18.18. Then it diagnoses human psychology. The 3 gunas have already been covered in the 14th chapter and in the 17th chapter. But because people still might think that they have transcended the gunas, Krishna points out that there are 3 gunas operative in knowledge, action, as a doer, as the intellect, as far as determination is concerned and happiness is concerned. This is from 18 to 19. It's a diagnosis of human psychology. It's a self-diagnostic manual. So if you think that you have transcended the gunas, please study these chapters and then decide where you are and where you should move. And notably, in 18.40, Krishna says that there is no being in the 3 worlds, whether he's a god, whether he's a rishi, whether he's a guru, whether he's a saint, no one who is beyond these 3 gunas. So he tries to point out that these 3 gunas are prevalent in everybody. No one can falsely claim to be free of the gunas. Then, this is from 19 to 40. So what to do? If we are going to be trapped by the gunas, regardless of where we are or who we are, what should we do? So Krishna points out in the 14th chapter that the way to rise beyond the gunas is to have avyabhicharani bhakti. Mam chayo mam chayo. He points out in the 14th chapter that mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samati tetan brahma bhuya kalpate. So he has pointed out in the 14th chapter that the way to transcend the gunas is by engaging in bhakti yoga. And what is that bhakti yoga? How does one perform that bhakti yoga? So Krishna explains in 18.41 to 18.48 that while the gunas influence you, these gunas are different for individual people. And these differences form the social structure, not by birth, but by guna and karma, by your inner qualities and by the nature of your work. And he comes to the final conclusion that when you perform your swadharma in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion to the all-pervading Lord, one attains perfection. So the method to transcend the gunas is to do bhakti yoga. And the way to do bhakti yoga is that according to your gunas and your karma, you have a swadharma. And this swadharma, if you do in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion to the all-pervading Lord, you attain perfection. Yata pravrittir bhutanam yena sarvam idam tatam Swakarmana abhyarchaya siddhim mindati manavaha. This is from verses 41 to 48. So sannyas and tyag tells you whether you're renounced or not. That's 1 to 12. 13 to 18 tells you that action depends on 5 factors. So don't think you are the doer. 19 to 40 tells you that how the gunas entrap you, and that no one is free from the gunas. No guru, no God, no devta, nobody is free from these 3 gunas. Everyone is victim of these 3 gunas, which includes the rishi, muni, everybody. And then he points out that the way to become free from these gunas, of course, in 14th chapter, he has pointed out that you have to engage in bhakti yoga. In the 17th chapter, he has already pointed out that you do it through the offering of Om Tat Sat. And he says here that bhakti yoga and Om Tat Sat are to be done through the purpose of your creation, which is your swadharma, which is according to your guna and your karma, not according to your birth. So from 49 to 55, he points out that once you have performed your swadharma and you have attained perfection, so how do you purify yourself further to reach Brahmabhut and to reach Parabhakti? This is explained in 18.49 to 18.55. Now we come to the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita, which is 18.56 to 18.66. This talks about complete surrender. If 49 to 55 takes you from purification to bhakti, which shows you the highest means to know God, 41 to 48 tells you about Swadharma, which teaches you how to spiritualize your everyday ordinary duties. 56 to 66 presents the supreme teaching, which is complete surrender unto God, complete absorption in God and forgetfulness of self. Having explained this secret of surrender, Krishna points out that you should not explain this path to everybody. There are some people who are not qualified to receive this knowledge of surrender. And that is covered between 67 and 71, which also tells you that the highest duty you can do is to share this knowledge with other devotees of Krishna. So 67 to 71 deals with who should receive the Gita and how you should protect its sacred knowledge. And finally, between 18.72 to 18.78, Krishna and Arjuna, Krishna and Sanjaya come to the conclusion of Arjuna's final decision. And it demonstrates the full fruit of this teaching. So this is very important. So these are the ways by which the 18th chapter is structured rather, so that you do not have any problems with the Bhagavad Gita while studying 18th chapter and you do not get lost in the verses. And as far as possible, what I will try to do is that I will try to teach you according to these divisions. So what I shall do is that in the subsequent classes, I will cover renunciation and I will explain in detail why the Bhagavad Gita from the 2nd chapter onwards is consistently telling you not to renounce the world. For example, this verse which says, Kamyanam karmanam nyasam. Kamyanam karmanam nyasam. Sannyasam kavayo vidu. Sa eva sadhushu krito. Moksha dwaram. Sa eva sadhushu krito. So Krishna is explaining that in the 18th chapter, the first verse, Krishna clearly points out that there is no way by which you will be renouncing activity, but you will be renouncing this selfish desire-based activity. Kamyana means selfish desire. So when you perform your duties with the desire to fulfill the duties that God has given you, such duties are free of selfish desire. You can actually go back to 4.19. And in 4.19, Krishna clearly says the same thing. Yasya sarve samarambha kama sankalpa varjitah jnana agni dagdha karmani tamahu panditam buddha. That when a person, his every action is performed without selfish desire, you must understand that his karmas have been burnt up in the fire of knowledge. And indeed, he is considered to be a pandit and a wise man. So, if you look at the sequence of the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, it says, renounce attachment to fruit, understand you are not the doer, discern the operations of the gunas in yourself, perform your swadharma as worship, attain purity of your buddhi and the Brahma-bhut state, bhakti, para-bhakti will flower in its fullness, and finally complete surrender or sharanagati. I'm repeating this. The sequence of the themes is renounce attachment to the fruit, understand you are not the doer, discern the operation of the gunas, perform your swadharma as worship, attain purity of buddhi and the Brahma-bhut state, para-bhakti will flower in its fullness, and learn to completely surrender unto God, Krishna, which is called Sharanagati. At each stage, Krishna removes one object of misplaced reliance. So the first is, you have a misplaced reliance that I rely on the fruits of my action. So Krishna says, renounce them. The second misplaced reliance is that I am the doer. I rely on my own sense of doership. And then Krishna says, you are not the independent doer. There are, in fact, 5 factors. I rely on my intellect, on what I experience in the world. And Krishna says, even your intellect is conditioned by the gunas, because that is all Prakriti. Then you say, I am righteous. I perform all my duties. So Krishna says, perform all your swadharma as worship and sacrifice with love and devotion, not as a self-justification. Use your duty to dissolve your sense of self. Then there is, I rely on my own spiritual attainment. Oh, I have attained moksha with whatever means I have practiced. So Krishna says, you may think you have attained spiritual attainment, but even Brahma-bhut is not the final stage. I pointed this out earlier also. what I'm repeating this verse from the Bhagavatam. Ye anya aravindaksha vimuktamaninas tvai ashtabhavada vishuddha buddhaya aruya krichrena parampada tata anadritam yusmad angraya tasmad yusmad angraya. So there, you see, he declares, O lotus-eyed one, I think it is Brahma who is speaking to Krishna, that people think they have attained Brahma Bhut through their own austerities and through their own practices. But he said, because they do not take shelter of your lotus feet, they must fall down from that position. So, if you rely on your own spiritual attainment that you have managed to attain Brahma Bhut, you have managed to attain moksha. Moksha is the beginning of spiritual life. Moksha is the beginning of parabhakti. And Brahma Bhut is not the final goal, but it is the beginning. And lastly, I rely on Krishna alone is the conclusion. Mam ekam sharanam vraja. I surrender unto Krishna alone. This is the sequence, the structure, and the themes of the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita. You would be wise to contemplate this sequence, understand in your Bhagavad-Gita how each of these sections or themes comprise the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita, so that you may then proceed with me to study the rest of the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita in the segments which I have now described and defined. This is a very, very important chapter. In fact, it is the most important chapter because it comes at the conclusion of the Bhagavad-Gita. And even people who give lectures on the Bhagavad-Gita, I have seen, become bewildered and confused and get lost in individual verses. But it is so important to understand the macro perspective, to understand the structure, to understand the themes, to understand how each theme is connected to the next theme, so that you can see where the 18th chapter leads you to its final conclusion. So I hope you have marked all these things in your Bhagavad Gita book, so that you will now understand how you are supposed to study the Bhagavad Gita. And from the next time, we will begin each of the themes one by one. Does anyone have any queries, questions, comments on what I have covered so far?
Thank you, Shantanu for today's wonderful session. My first question to you is if one were to take just one practical lesson from this chapter into daily life, what should it be?
One lesson. The one lesson is to surrender to Krishna completely. And to do that, to perform your everyday duties in a spirit of sacrifice to the all-pervading Lord. It's already pointed out in 6.1 that anashritaha karma phalam karya karma karoti ya sa yogi cha sannyasi na niragnir na chakriya. So the one who performs his God-given duties is a spirit of sacrifice to the all-pervading Lord. He is the true yogi, he is the true sannyasi, not one who lights no fire and who does no work. So that is the essence of what he is saying. And ultimately he is saying that abandon everything else that you've heard. You see, Krishna starts talking about karma and this and that. But this book, Bhagavad Gita, busts two ideas completely. One is the Bhagavad Gita is a karma busting book. And the other part that it busts is, it busts the myth that renouncing the world externally is the way to attain God. These are the two major concepts that are busted in the Bhagavad Gita. If you can understand these two, you have surely got the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, Krishna says, abandon all other varieties of religion and surrender unto me alone. Don't get confused by karma. Don't get confused by external renunciation. Do your duty in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion to me, and you will attain perfection.
My next question is the chapter distinguishes between sannyas and tyag. How should these ideas be interpreted in modern non-monastic life?
So, we are coming to this in the next session that we will conduct.
Hmm.
And I will begin with this aspect of the Bhagavad Gita, where we will cover 18.1 to 18.12. What is sannyas and what is tyag? And we will also do that with reference to the earlier verses in the Bhagavad Gita, which have been reiterated here between 18.1 and 12. And we will also have references to other texts on which the Bhagavad Gita relates.
All right. Thank you so much for today's lovely session, Shantanu ji. And to all our viewers, if you liked it too, then don't forget to share this video with your loved ones. Also, stay tuned as we meet again on next Thursday at 8 a.m. for another session on the Bhagavad Gita. Hare Krishna.
Hari Om, Jai Shri Krishna, Hare Krishna.